Good morning. Listen, my only opening remark is that I hope that everyone's safe and not going too stir crazy. I'll take any questions.
Hey, Mickey, what's you all's draft setup for you, Sean and Jeff? I guess are you guys, how are you communicating and those kinds of things? And I guess what are the troubleshooting methods that you have in place?
Yeah, look, we're using the technology. You know that I think this is we're using WebEx. I think most of the time for some of these meetings we're using. I think this one here is Zoom. But look, we're using the technology and we're communicating. We each have a setup in our own homes, and we're ready to go for this draft.
Mickey, what have been some of the biggest challenges just in all of this?
Yeah, I think the one challenge is that you don't have as much give and take with your entire staff, all of your scouts and coaches. There's a lot of conversations that go on, a lot of nuance about, when you're talking about a particular player, a particular prospect and the vision that you have for him on your team. And so I think we missed some of that.
Mickey, the Cowboys admitted that they suffered a bit of a glitch during their draft during a trade scenario. Did you guys have any glitches during your mock draft?
Nope, we didn't. It went pretty smooth for us.
Hey, Mickey, I joined a minute late. I had some problems connecting. Stop me if you have answered this, but can you walk us through what that virtual process was like and what you guys had to do for the mock draft on Monday?
Yeah, it was, look, we're on a, let's see, how can I best describe this? Look, we have, a communication system with the league, and we have a backup, which is the backup is a conference call effectively. And, there's a system to set up, and you basically send in your pick when you're on the clock. We have a screen that's showing who's on the clock, the clock itself winding down, and then when a pick is made, that pick shows up on the screen, and at the same time the clock resets to the team that's now on the clock. So it's in a lot of ways it's similar to what we do when we're calling our guy at the draft in New York and having him fill out a card and send in the card. So instead of that being a manual process with an individual, we're doing it over the internet. It's relatively simple. It's just, listen, the things that you worry about is do you have a glitch with the internet, or do you have a power outage, or do you have something that happens that interrupts that technology? And for example, I know that we're expecting a storm here tomorrow in New Orleans, and so man, does that include a power outage? And how do we handle a power outage? Which we've got backup systems in order to do that.
Mickey, comparatively speaking to previous drafts, are you about as comfortable as you would feel normally, I guess, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, our scouts do a great job of getting the evaluations, getting the information to us. Obviously, we're missing a piece of that this year. Every team is missing a piece of that this year that comes from the pro days and the physicals that haven't been completed. So, we're all missing the same amount of information, but we also have a lot of information.
Hey, Mickey, maybe the first day with one pick and then the second day with two picks. With the new setup, do you maybe envision the third day with maybe a lot of picks and things moving faster, that communication will be at a premium, or potentially if there are any issues with communication, it could potentially be on Saturday?
Well, I think it can happen at any time. Obviously, the time's compressed and on the third day when you have less time per pick and less time to explore trades. I think you probably have to do that a little sooner than we would ordinarily do it. But look, I think that by then we'll have the system pretty well down. So I'm not expecting a lot of issues, but I know that we'll be prepared for them.
You mentioned everybody sort of missing a piece throughout this process. Do you foresee that impacting the decisions you guys make over the next couple of days?
I think that, I can't really answer that generally. I think that's more specific to a particular prospect. So I'd say on the surface, no. And yet, look, each one of these prospects is a little different. So when you're missing a piece of information that might be critical for that particular guy, then obviously it would impact it.
How much of a challenge is not having access to the medicals, Mickey? Not only with these rookie prospects, I mean, granted, you had the combine for some of these guys in the first round, but even for free agents, a guy like Emmanuel Sanders, who you guys brought in the offseason.
Yeah, look, I think, first of all, we have physical information on the guys that were at the combine. And there was obviously some follow-up on some of those players that we haven't been able to complete. So there's a piece of that missing. There's the guys that weren't at the combine. That's become a challenge to get medical information on those players. I think what you said about the free agents. Now, look, we can communicate with the teams that they were with, and we have access to some of it. Obviously, if a guy's playing the previous year, that tells you a lot too. So we have some of the information. It is a challenge, though. It is a challenge to complete some of these deals, particularly deals that are larger financially.
Mickey, if you can't do a follow-up with a prospect, how much or little does that affect your thought process going into the draft in terms of we couldn't quite get everything we wanted?
Yeah, look, it affects you to some degree. It just depends upon your level of concern about that particular item, and so it's hard to give a general answer for that because it's a lot more prospect specific. It has to do with the particular prospect, where you might be drafting him, what you've got invested. So there's a lot of variables. It's hard to answer that question without talking about somebody specifically.
Have you guys talked to the league about any protections with these contracts as it applies to both rookies and the free agents because of not having that access you normally would to the medicals?
No, not really.
Vicky, I know I'm asking you a lot of technical questions here, but I'm just curious about a lot of all this. So say there is a storm and your computer freezes or whatever. So would you have to call the league yourself on maybe your cell phone and say, hey, can we stop the draft? Or do you call Sean and he call? I mean, how do you even know what you would do? I mean, I assume you have a backup plan.
Yeah, well, look,
plan.
I can speak to my house. In my setup, I've got a generator. So if there's a power outage, hopefully the generator comes on and I'm operating normally. If not, if the internet's interrupted, look, we have cell phones. We have I can communicate by cell phone to Jeff, to Sean, to any of our staff people, as well as we've got an open conference call line on a separate phone with the league. So we've got backup systems. We'll be able to communicate. Look, certainly if we have a glitch, we have something that happens, we'll notify the league, and if it delays our decision, then they've got procedures in place to handle that.
Mickey, how much has your plan maybe for undrafted rookies changed with this? Have you? I mean, I'm assuming you guys have a strategy, but how much has the strategy changed given everything that's going on right now?
Yeah, we're still talking about that. That's a little bit of chaos that happens after the draft. When you're all together in a room and you've got a lot of conversations going on at one time at the end of the draft. You've got scouts and coaches and all of us involved in that process. And so the main thing here is we have to just be keeping track of what those conversations are and what the commitments are that have been made, so that we fill the roster out and we don't overcommit ourselves. So we're still discussing that and how that's going to operate, but I think we have a pretty good handle on it.
Not to get too specific here, are you seeing teams talk about deals and trades earlier this week because of communication issues on Thursday night and being the great unknown as how quickly things could come together? Just in a general way, I feel like maybe there's more phone traffic or conversation traffic because of things being completed in a timely manner.
Yeah, I feel like so far it's just been pretty normal. I think it's been about the normal amount.
Mickey, do you think that what you did in free agency has given you a lot of flexibility throughout the draft?
Well, look, that's always the goal, Ed, is to fill as many of our needs and musts as we can in free agency, so that we can pretty much have free reign during the draft and not be tied to a particular position. I wouldn't say that we accomplished everything that we wanted to accomplish in free agency, but I feel pretty good about where we're at as a roster. And I think that we'll approach this just like we've approached prior years.
Mickey, can you say anything about your process on how you do you guys try to work out who might be realistically there for y'all at 24, and to use that to kind of process beforehand?
Yeah.
How you would make a move to trade up for somebody, or can you just kind of get into that process?
Yeah, absolutely. We talk pretty extensively about who, what are the group of players that might be available at 24? What are the group of players that might be right in front of us, 5, 6 picks? And then what potentially is available at the top of the next round. So yeah, we spend a lot of time discussing, hey, is there a particular player that we might want to explore trading up for? So we spend a lot of time doing that. That's the bulk of this week, actually.
And I'm assuming that's just so, if a scenario arises, you already have kind of like, plan A, B, and C kind of worked out for how you'd want to approach it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mickey, with the willingness to trade up, as you guys have historically, throughout the years, is that a strategy you look to implement, or is that just more belief in a prospect in your scouting, and there just comes a guy that you have the perfect vision for?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all those things. I think it's a conviction on a particular prospect, a particular player, and a conviction with our coaching staff that they have a vision for that particular player fitting into our system and helping us, win games. So that's exactly right.
I talked to one team, Mickey, who actually enjoyed the virtual chats because, as they described it, at the combine, you've got people just coming in and out. They've had their workout. It's a little frantic, but getting these players in their own settings and getting to circle back with them, they said they got a better feel for the players. Was that your experience? What did you think of having those guys in a virtual room as opposed to a room?
Yeah, I think it was a good experience. I don't know that I would say it was better or worse, really, for that matter. I think it was a good experience, and it was a good supplement to, some of the work that we had already done on a lot of these guys. We were able to get guys a second time and delve a little deeper into some areas that maybe we had questions about. So I thought it was a really good process. And I think we got a lot out of it. I probably would agree with whoever that GM was that look, it was valuable.
How many 30 visits did you guys actually get in the building before the lockdown?
I think that would be 0, as I recall.
Hey, Mickey, I'm sure that actual 3 days of the draft is always one of the most fun times because everyone's in the same room and it's probably very chaotic with the back and forth. What are you going to miss about that aspect of things, having to do this alone in your house?
Yeah, well, since we haven't done it in our house, I don't know what I'm going to miss. But I do know that, look, I love the draft. I love the process that we have. And we're a team that has a lot of people in our draft room. And there's a lot of conversation, a lot of give and take, a lot of opinions being given. And I like that. I think there's an aspect of that draws your staff closer that I like.
Everyone talks about the draft, but no one's really talked about the undrafted free agent process after the draft, which is always described as complete chaos in the room. So does that majorly change when you're going to have to talk to your staff over the phones and everything's happening very quickly?
Yeah, well, it'll definitely be different. And look, there'll be a premium on communications because there'll be a lot of conversations going on independently, and without that ability to be in the next room or be right next to each other and keeping track of the commitments that are being made, and the players in the positions that you're losing. So it's definitely going to be different. We've talked a lot about it. I feel good about how we're going to handle that, and yet it'll be different. That's for sure.
Mickey, how much can you share on the team's quarterback philosophy? I know you're not going to say who you want to draft or whether you want to draft them, but what has your approach been in recent years to the need versus not overreacting and forcing yourselves to take one?
Yeah, look, I think that listen, I think that anytime you have a chance to get a quality quarterback prospect, regardless of your quarterback situation, you'd like to take advantage of that. For us, it hasn't come. There hasn't been the match where we're picking with a prospect that we really like, and so I think our approach is exactly the same this year. Is that, look, if there's someone there that we really like and have a vision for at the time we're picking, then we're not afraid to pull that trigger.
You're probably not qualified to answer this question because of your lack of drafting quarterbacks, but is that a position where if you've got a bunch of guys graded, 85, 85, 85 on your board, the quarterback with a grade of 78 comes into that conversation, or, something like does quarterback have to be judged on almost a different scale?
That's a good question. I look, again, I think that gets back to, hey, do you have a clear vision for, a prospect? Do you how does he fit with your team, with your roster? And look, it's hard to answer in a general way, because look, when we develop a group of players that we're looking at a particular spot in the draft, those grades are pretty similar, regardless of position. So it's hard for me to say, hey, we're going to elevate someone just because of the position.
Mickey, how much did what happened in the Vikings game influence your thinking in the offseason? Or, how did you look at that? How did you perceive that moving forward as to how much it influenced your offseason plan in total?
Yeah, I don't think that any one particular game or any one particular play, for that matter, influences you. I think, look, the thing that I think we've had a lot of success doing, I think we're good at, is removing the emotion and evaluating our team and our roster. I think our coaches do a great job of that. Our personnel department does a great job of that, and then we move forward based upon those evaluations. And so, I think it would be a mistake if we let one game or one event influence us too much. And look, you got to take that emotion out of it. That's why some of those decisions and some of these items that we want to get completed in the off season, we take our time. We don't rush into a plan. We let that develop.
I'll stick with the same influence theme here that Ed just brought. How much does Christian McCaffrey's contract influence the way you look at Alvin Kamara's contract going forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't really thought about that yet. So, clearly you pay attention to the market, you pay attention to what guys are getting paid around the league. And look, it's never just about one contract or one guy. It's about a whole group of them. And we'll follow the same process we've always followed.
How much information would you say has been lost on the non-combine guys with the, height, weight, speed measurements and being able to do your prototypes? And how do you fill in those gaps if you can't get a time or something?
Yeah, look, well, you can't fill in the gaps if you can't get the information. You can't fill in the gaps. So you're basically trusting, what you see, what our scouts and what our coaches see when they evaluate the tape, and look, there's been a lot of good decisions made based upon that over the years, and I trust the ability of our people to evaluate.
And just the donation you just made to the the draft-a-thon? Why was that important to you to do?
Well, look, first of all, I can't take too much credit for that because that was, I think that was Howie Roseman's idea at Philadelphia, and he brought it to the group that, hey, this would be a good idea if we each contributed. You know, it's going to raise a pretty good amount of money, and I think he was able to get Doug Peterson to challenge the coaches, and so hopefully we'll end up with $500,000 or so that we can contribute. That won't be the only thing that we do, but look, I think it was a good program, and I'm excited to be part of it.
Back to Nick's first question. Some of those guys have been doing virtual pro days. How much stock do you put into the times that some of them were running or some of the measurements? Yeah, look, I listen. We gather the information. We look at the tapes. We look at the video, not tapes. We look at the video of those workouts. They're good to have. You know, it's good to see guys doing things. It's good to see, you know, if a guy has a shoulder issue, for example, and you see him bench press, that's valuable information. So it gives you confidence that you know, if he had a shoulder injury, for example, that he's recovering from that enough to do, you know, the bench press or even push-ups for that matter. So it's just it's, you know, it's hard to say that you're putting a lot of stock in that information, but you're just gathering these bits and pieces to put together a big picture.
Along those lines, do you know if your scouting department requested any workouts specifically from any prospect?
Yeah, we you know, we'll request guys to do certain things. Yes, we do.
Mickey, is there a position that jumps out in terms of depth in this year's class?
Well, look, I think the most obvious thing is that there's a lot of receivers at the top of this draft that are really good players, and so that's probably more than most years, and so I think that's the thing that jumps out at you the most.
Hey, Mickey, I saw where Diana Rossini just reported that Sean had a Zoom meeting with the players and told them there'll be no off season. Show up in the best shape of your life in July, ready for training camp. Could you just maybe elaborate on that and the thought process and how you all are handling all that?
Yeah, look, you know, Sean, I don't know what Sean said exactly, but we're going to have communication with our players during this time. You know, we're going to have some things that we talk to them about. I think his reference is more about, look, pay attention to your family, pay attention to keeping yourself and your family safe, abide by, you know, the orders of each of the states that you're in. We'll handle the rest of it, get yourself in shape. And then when we're able to get together, we'll move on and we'll have a great training camp and a great season. So I think his message is more about guys paying attention to their families and themselves. And we're not going to have, you know, any physical activity that we do virtually.
How much easier is that to do that, Mickey, given that some teams, like, as you know, I cover the Cowboys, have an entirely new coaching staff? I would imagine with having Drew Brees there and for the most part, a lot of the same pieces, it's a little bit easier to pump the brakes on OTA when typically you're installing a lot of the same stuff at training camp anyways.
Yeah, look, I think it is a bit of an advantage if you have, you know, you have the same coaching staff. You haven't had a lot of changes on your coaching staff. You have a core group of players that are the same, and you know, a system that, look, we've had here for 14 years. So I think that does make it easier. I would equate it back to what was it, 2011, when we didn't have an off season. You know, we were able to hit the ground running, you know, at the end of that period. So, I probably would feel a little differently if we did have a lot of changes on our roster and our coaching staff, but we're fortunate that we don't.
Mickey, I just wanted to clarify the last question. Is there going to be no, I guess, formal off season? Like the communication is just like you would have, I guess, is it more casual is what you were saying as far as the virtual program goes?
Yeah, we'll have some stuff that guys will participate in. And look, I've been so focused on the draft, to be honest with you, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about that off season program that as we're going to go forward. But you know, we're not going to be doing virtual workouts, you know, and things like that. So again, we want to make sure guys are focused on their families and safety, and And look, we have a lot of guys that we have great faith and trust in terms of being in shape when we do get going for training camp.
Mickey, what is the hope for a July training camp right now? Does that fall under complete unknown, or does that fall under what you're working toward unless you hear differently?
Yeah, look, I think that's a good question. Listen, you guys know as much as I do, really. You know, we don't know what the future holds. We're gonna plan as if we're gonna have a normal training camp, but you know, we don't know that those decisions will be made above my pay grade.
Mickey, I'm sure we've asked you about this before, but what impact has Jeff Ireland had on these last couple of drafts with you guys? What does he bring to the table that's allowed you to be successful in the draft?
Yeah, look, Jeff's tremendous, and it's not just Jeff; it's him and his entire college personnel department. You know, I love the talent that we have on our college personnel staff. They're great evaluators. They're conscientious. They're really hardworking as a group. And the best thing I think we've got going is that we have a great level of communication between our coaching staff and our scouts. And so our coaches, Sean and his staff, do a great job of communicating exactly what they need and what they're looking for at each and every position. And I think that's led to, the success we've had in the last few drafts. And look, Jeff's a huge part of that.
Mickey, do you think you guys have done enough in this offseason that when you go for that first pick in the first round, that it will be a best player available as opposed to needing to fill a specific need?
Well, listen, I think I've said this before. Look, that's always our goal. And I think we've been able to stick to that philosophy over the years. I feel like that served us well, and we'll do that again this year. But at the same time, look, again, oftentimes it comes down to a choice between 3 or 4 guys, all graded in the same vicinity. And then you look to, hey, how does this guy fit our roster and what we need right now? So it's always a combination of the two. But obviously we lean toward the highest graded player.
Why don't we take one more question, please? Go ahead, Mike Triplett.
Yeah. Is there anything that in this process you think you or teams in general would be less likely to draft, whether that's somebody that I think Sean mentioned, if there's character or injury concerns that you didn't have a chance to investigate, or maybe a raw developmental player or a quarterback, since you don't have an off season to work with them? Has that changed any of draft philosophies with any of those categories?
Yeah, Mike, I don't know that I can say it would change philosophies. I do think we've had discussions about guys that are a little bit more developmental, and the fact that we're not going to have as much time with them this off season. And so they're going to be less, it's going to be harder for them to contribute in year one than it would ordinarily. But look, it comes down to, hey, what's your long-term vision for these guys? It's not going to prevent us from taking someone that we have a long-term vision for, but we recognize that we may not get as much in year one as you would otherwise. And look, I think that's generally true. If we don't have an off season with these guys, then it's going to be harder for any player to contribute in year one than it would ordinarily.
All right, Mickey, thank you very much for your time. Members of the media, we'll look forward to circling in with you tomorrow night following the first round. And if you guys need anything at all, you can reach out to me or Justin or Evan, Davis, and anybody in our department. And thank you again, Mickey.
Good to see you, Mickey.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Thanks, Mickey.
Be safe.